Hello to all my divine beings, and welcome to this week's episode of Confessions of a New Age Goddess. As always, I'm the New Age Goddess herself, Melissa. Joining us today is Michael Overlie of Dogs and Men, LLC. Michael is a dog fanatic, nature lover, energy healer, author, and life purpose coach. Michael, welcome to the pod.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Likewise. So could you kind of introduce us, tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a 53-year-old dog-loving smart aleck who decided to try and live a different way. I had this awakening about 4.5 years ago after the death of my brother. And now I've decided to dedicate myself to helping others find their own path. And I realized that these amazing dogs are actually here to help us do that.
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting. And see, what I really liked when I saw your profile was that, yes, it's about dogs. I love dogs, but also it's about men and spirituality, and that's something I've been wanting to do a topic about it for a long time now. But of course, I need a man to talk about it with. And not just a man who is in the spiritual realm, but someone who is really honing in on that bit of it itself. Not just, a man who does Reiki, but a man who talks with other men about spirituality. Because even just in my experiences, yes, a majority of my clients have been female, but I have had a few men, or I have had men come to me in confidence, asking questions, what have you. And there was one time where it was a couple guys, and I know they're all in the same friend group, and I can assure you they did not talk to each other about this, but like individually felt, safe enough to talk to me. And I'm just like, wow, these conversations need to be had, and they need to be had in a safe space that's not, too fluffy and full of fairies, but a little bit more with the masculine energy. So yeah, very excited to hear more about you. But like you did say, this is something that you kind of fell into about 4 years ago. Just a little bit more color on how you got into the spiritual world.
Oh, God, that's great. Great question. It took me all these years of my life and not knowing that I was able to express myself, not knowing that being different was okay, not knowing all of these things, and so much repressed anger and even rage, was just all this stuff I had bottled up. And when my brother died, I grieved so heavily. And I realized later it wasn't just him. It wasn't the loss of him, because he was kind of my hero. My older brother was this beautiful man. But it allowed me to release and express all these other things that I had been bottled up. I'd put on top of myself, and identities other people had put on top of me. And I realized that I don't have to be all this. I can do something a little different. And it wasn't a gigantic awakening. It was like a chink in the armor. And then I just became more aware and interested in other things. And I started noticing more and hearing things, and probably things I'd heard before, but now I was picking up on them. I became a voracious reader and then started studying different modalities and energy healing. And I realized that, oh my God, there's so many guys out there who could so benefit from this, because we're not raised the same as most women are. We're supposed to be tough and strong and, I'm a man, and see what that gets us. You see kind of what we have in our society, our patriarchal society now. And we need help. But we won't ask for it. We sure as shit won't ask for it. So this has sent me down this completely other direction. I never had any idea I'd be heading this way. And I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of men who they feel more comfortable talking to another man, and that makes complete sense to me. So yeah, I think it's something that is so valuable, and we just need more of it. Okay, great. And then why, I would just like to hear from a man's point of view on this. Why do you think, besides the way we're raised, conditioned from society, why do you think more women seem to be into spirituality as opposed to men, when there is a great need for men, besides kind of what we already covered?
Great question. I think a lot of it has to do with women are just sometimes a little more and sometimes a lot more willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to share with their friends, their fears, mishaps, mistakes, their feelings. My God, man, don't talk about your feelings. Don't you ever do that. And I think this creates a greater opening for them. And when they realize that they want to change something, I think they can more easily step into that action. And I think men, we think that we're going to be perceived as weak if we're vulnerable, which is a big no-no. Don't let them see you hurt. Don't let them see you cry. Don't show any signs of weakness. And this is how a lot of us grew up. So therefore, to be vulnerable in any way, shape, or form is actually dangerous. We perceive that to be dangerous.
Yeah. And another thing too is I think even a woman's definition and a man's definition of vulnerability is different too, because for example, I remember I was dating this guy and I had to break up with him, and he was like, Melissa, I am really surprised with you because I made myself vulnerable for you. Oh. And I'm thinking, when he says this, I'm thinking, oh, when you told me about something that happened in your childhood, I'm thinking stuff like this. And he was like, yeah, I was vulnerable with you when I had Panda Express with you. And I know, like, my face is also like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, when I feel vulnerable, I eat Panda Express. And I know I ate Panda Express with you. And I know how crazy that sounds. Like, trust me, I know you're like, oh my God, she was with a crazy person. But do you see what I'm saying? His thing was, I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm going to eat. Or maybe I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm going to go, take it out on the punching bag, which is fine, which is totally cool. But as a woman, I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking, oh, I need to go call my girlfriend or whatever it may be. So yeah, even something that you would just kind of assume, I know you're not supposed to assume, that you would just assume vulnerability means talking, might not even be the case. That's how different it can really be. Yeah, so that was just a fun example I thought I'd bring up for that.
I'm going to think about that next time I go to Panda Express.
Yeah, and I thought that was such a weird food because, like, if I'm upset, like, I feel like, and I'm hungry, I feel like I would eat a sandwich, not like something I have to use chopsticks with, but whatever, we don't need to get into that. Okay, cool. And then I really also wanted to talk about, the second bit, it's men and dogs. So, how did you realize a man's best friend, really has a big influence on us as well? How did you discover that?
I mean, that saying in itself is not new, right? This has been around a long time. So somebody somewhere started recognizing that, hey, these dogs are more than just a cool thing to hang out with and pet. When my folks divorced, I was like 11 or 12, I think. I had a really hard time. I kind of blamed myself. I didn't know what was going on. My folks never discussed anything, or, we never knew they fought anything like that. So one day Dad was just packed and gone. So I thought maybe it was something I did, and I got depressed. And my dog at the time was fantastic. He was softer and more gentle and would just come to me and lay into me. And he just gave me that love and security and that reassurance that I needed at that time. It was just amazing. And, I've had other dogs throughout my life, but it wasn't until I had this awakening after my brother's death that I could look back and see all these experiences that I had had. I was suicidal as a kid because of my folks' divorce. I didn't know how to process any of it. And then my own divorce and a drinking problem, and I got in trouble. And all these things. And these dogs each gave me something different in my life, and it was fantastic. I started to wake up to that. And with men, I think the bond can be a little different. I think we bond very strongly with our animals because we don't get that in other places. We don't tend to have, in a lot of cases, we don't tend to have the same depth of relationships with our guy friends that women do together because we just don't share the same way. But we can with our dogs. We can be completely vulnerable at home, walking around and in our tidy whities, our belly hanging out. They don't care, if we brushed our teeth or what our hair looks like, or if we have hair or what kind of car we drive. So we have this different level of acceptance that we naturally get from the dog. And I think that's that's a complete in for these guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also why I'm sure dogs are used in therapy, with PTSD, whatever it may be. And also another thing too is dogs do know, and pets in general, I would vouch to say certain pets, they do know when you need that extra comforting. That's why we have the emotional support animals. That's why we have those animals as well. So that totally makes sense to me. And yeah, if you saw like a man being vulnerable with a woman in public, like a woman holding a man, maybe some guys would be embarrassed about that. But if you see like a guy playing with his dog in public, you don't think anything of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be that way. I wish it wasn't, but I think we're slowly getting out of that. But it is a whole process because it's kind of like you don't have to just change one person's perspective, but just so many. And it's hard. It's hard to evolve as a group as opposed to a singular person sometimes. Okay. And then you did write a book about this topic. If you kind of wanted to dive a little bit in about what the book is about or who it's for.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting experience. I didn't know, when all this started, I'd be writing a book. And then I started looking into it and realized that I had actually already written a book. I just had it in all these leather-bound journals and stuff I had been writing out for years. So the book is written from a guy's perspective, basically to other guys, although anybody I think can get something out of it. And it's a kind of a guide on a journey, and things that I went through, not necessarily what somebody else would go through, but things that I went through, experiences I had, insights I had, and how my dogs helped me along the way. And I posed a lot of questions to the guys, things to do with their dogs, things to think about, even while they're out taking a walk with their dog. It's just a primer to get guys to realize that there is a different way to be. You can be happy. You can still be super successful, and you can be happy. It doesn't have to be either or. You can have an amazing life, and it doesn't have to mean that you're, an upper level management or some, wealthy entrepreneur. You can be happy no matter what. But the whole premise is that it brings you back to who you actually are, to remember who you are at your core.
Yes, yes. And I think any healthy way that you go about it is useful. If you use an animal, if you use physical activity, whatever it may be, there's all these different tools that you can use to kind of get to that point. And it doesn't always have to look like meditation, it doesn't always have to look like talk therapy. And just even taking a walk is a form of meditation. So if you can find another way to do it, you hit gold, I think.
Yeah. When our animals are they're beings of presence, right? They're not conflicted about what's going to happen in their day. And, they're not worried about paying the mortgage and the car payment and this, and I got to meet Johnny at 5 for that. And, my boss wants this from me. Obviously, they don't have these other things going on in their lives. They can just be, and they're constantly showing us a different way to just be.
Yes.
So it's fantastic.
And any way you can find that is a valuable tool. And also another thing with animals too, like I'm a single bird mom of 2, and and so my parakeets, they'll be arguing with each other, as siblings do. And 1 minute they're arguing, and you're like, man, if 2 people were arguing, they would kind of separate for a while or cool down or not want to talk to the other person. And then like the next minute they're playing with each other, because that's just how animals are. They move on. They don't get stuck in, oh, what happened, an hour ago. They're over it. They probably had another argument by then, it's done. It's done. That moment has passed and we're on to the next thing now. So
yeah, that's great. I mean, they're not holding that story from 7 years ago when so-and-so said whatever it was. Yeah. They let it go, move on with your day.
Yeah. And I think people also forget we are also animals. If you want to talk about it, if you want to go back to biology class, I don't know, but we are still animals. I get it. We have a soul. I get all of that, but to a certain extent, we could embody that if we wish to choose so. You
Mhm.
see, like we could have that mentality, and it takes work, I think. It takes a retraining, but you can get
Mhm.
there. You can get, it's a choice always. We always have free will, no matter what the situation.
Right.
Yeah. And then I think um something else I wanted to talk to you too. Okay. So when a male client comes to you, right, approaches you, what do these clients usually look like? Or do you see a common pattern, a common theme? Just if you could kind of give me a little color to that. I was always curious.
Yeah, sure. Well, most of these guys they've experienced some success in their life, right? These are not 20-year-olds. There's guys who have had through college and into their careers and have primarily done relatively well for themselves. But they're at this point where they they feel like something needs to change. They don't know if it's just a career thing or if it's they're looking for something else, some higher purpose. Um, and I wouldn't say it's midlife crisis, excuse me, but it's kind of in that age range. But they know there's something more for them. Like, right, they've achieved X, Y, and Z, but they're just there's a fulfillment that they're not obtaining, and it's not necessarily financial, but there's something maybe of being of service or something else that they know is out there waiting for them, and they just can't get to what that is.
Yes, yeah, I'm glad you said the word fulfillment because that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Mhm.
Is that, maybe things look good on paper and maybe they are, and that's great, but something is missing and it's something that is not tangible. They cannot put their finger on it.
Mhm.
Like you said, these are successful people. If they wanted it, they probably could get it if they could identify it. And I think that's where you and other people like you come along because you're a guide for the journey. You need guidance, you need direction. And that's what it sounds like to me, what they are looking for. And then you need action steps and a plan, and it comes with a lot of different elements. But if you can't even identify what is missing, how do we even get started, right?
Absolutely. Oh my God. So one of the hardest things for me was asking for help. You know, I'm pretty bright and I work hard and I've made things happen for myself in my life. And I said, oh, I want to go do that. So I went and did that. Oh no, this looks, oh, I'm going to go do this. So I made these things happen. And I get to a point where I'm lost. I'm not sure where to go. And the hardest thing for me to do was ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've had multiple mentors and people who coached me, and both men and women. And I've had these amazing people show up in my life that have just made, I guess it's perspective shift. These people are looking at different things. Think of looking down like a hallway with 100 doors. So you have 100 people, 100 doorways looking down the same hallway. Each person is going to have maybe a little different viewpoint on what is down that hall. It's just a slight shift. Um, yeah, it's been fantastic. And without that extra perception, that being able to modify what I thought I was looking at, yeah, it's made all the difference.
Yeah, and it is all about perception because perception is reality. And also, it kind of always reminds me of that optical illusion. I don't, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's like the face, and if you look at it one way, it's an old lady, and if you look at it the other way, it's a young woman.
Yep.
And I mean, I've done activities where I've shown people that, and they were kind of like so adamant that it's an old woman and there's no way it can be a young lady and you're crazy. And it's just like, look at it a little bit longer, try to see the young woman, like at
Mm,
least do that. And then eventually they usually get it, but it's just so funny in the beginning how they're like, no, it's this way. There's no way it could be another way.
yep.
And that just says a lot about a person that they can, that's a metaphor for life. They can only see things one way. And maybe if someone else points it out to them, they can see it, and that's where a guide comes along. But
Mm,
they have to be open to that. They have to be open to looking at a different perspective.
exactly. And that's the hard part. How do you tell someone that they're not open to seeing something differently? You can show them, as you mentioned, and they just may not see it. They may not be willing or ready. Um, and I think that's where some of these guys that come to me, they're just on the cusp. Like, I know there's something different. I'm willing to look at maybe one little thing that I wasn't willing to look at before. And that's where it starts. Sometimes that's all you need is this little tiny chink in the armor.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a dramatic change. It might end up being one at the end of the day, but
Mm.
baby steps. Baby
Little,
steps are,
yep,
yeah,
little shifts, baby steps. Exactly.
that's everything. That's like from that movie, What About Bob? You know what I'm talking about with
Yep.
what's his face, you know?
Yep. Bill
Um,
Murray and
Thank you. And the other
oh,
guy,
who was Bob? Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, he wrote a book called Baby Steps.
Mhm.
And I said, is this a real book? Because I think a lot of people could use this, you know? So yeah, I always use that analogy too. Okay, great. And then, so you gave us some color on, you know, who's your client, you know, your ideal client, the client you usually get. What are they looking for? Which I'm glad you said fulfillment. That was my first guess. But what does working with Michael look like?
It depends on the person. So I can do short term, I can do long term. I can tell people what I think and what my opinion would be on where I think they would be helpful for them to go. But this is really a dive. It's a dive needed to be taken by them. I can guide, I can help, I can direct, but these guys need to make a decision, and it's that they need to put themselves first. Some of these guys have families, and they have a hard time saying, "Oh, no, I have to." They think that putting themselves first means they have to ignore everybody else, when in fact they've been ignoring themselves this whole time. So it's creating a dedication to yourself, and if people aren't willing to do that, then I can help give resources and wish them well. But it's a simple process, but it's not easy. So
Mhm.
think about, you've been doing something the same way for 45 years, and people, I think they can do something overnight to change, and lasting change doesn't work that way. So um, I usually start with an online course and coaching. Some guys can go right to the coaching if I think that they're actually going to be willing to do it. But
Mhm.
it's a commitment for both of us, right? So
Mhm.
it has to be a fit. I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
that's not a very direct answer, but it's based on who the person is that's reaching out for help, what I think they actually need.
Oh yeah, I think that makes complete sense because any good teacher, any good guide is not going to teach the same thing the same way for everybody. I think that's a bad teacher. Like in grammar school, when there's a teacher and he has 25 students and they teach the concept one way, that's a bad teacher. That's a bad teacher.
Yeah.
You have 25 different people in there. Maybe, you know, 10 of them learn this way, 10 of them learn that way. I don't know, but you have to teach the same thing a multitude of different ways. You
Mm-hmm.
have to. If you're not, maybe this isn't the gig for you. I don't know what to tell you. I'm very strong opinions about that. But yeah, so that's great to hear that it is customized. I would be worried if you said it wasn't. And also, another thing too is, yes, they have to do the work too. You know, that they have to do the work too. They have to make the commitment.
Mm-hmm.
They do have to put themselves first because again, what's the analogy? You know, I need to put on my oxygen mask before I can put on an oxygen mask for my kid or
Yeah.
what have you. And then another thing too is if they cannot fully show up for themselves, I cannot believe that you're giving 100% to other things, because if I don't have a clear understanding of who I am and my needs are not getting met,
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on autopilot. I'm working on a half full tank. So that's why when people see it that way, they're like, oh my God, my family really would benefit from me taking care of myself. I can be a better father, parent, husband, etc. Yeah, so that's why it is imperative. And I know it's hard to see that at first maybe, but when you really dive deep you can see it. And then to your point, no, it doesn't have to be easy, and if it was easy everyone would do it, right? But also it just needs to be possible. Just to know that it is possible if I do put in the work and I do make the efforts that are required, then I think that's motivation too, because there's some people that are like, oh, maybe it's not possible, or maybe I'm doing it wrong. But when you can kind of get all those worries out of the way, all you really have in front of you is the work, is the game plan, is the roadmap. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And then, was there any like big aha moments that you would really like to share with us that we didn't get to, just amongst the topics?
I think the ability to be compassionate was another thing that was difficult for me to grasp. I had 15 years plus in healthcare as an EMT and medic, and worked in level 1 trauma centers and operating rooms, and I was really heady about it. I knew I wanted to help people, but I, because I was smart and I knew how to do X, Y, and Z, these things that I was taught. After my brother died and I saw the way my dog acted towards my mother, and she came for a visit, and this is just after he passed, and we were both really upset. And she was sitting on my couch and she was just crying. And I was really uncomfortable. And I watched this dog, this little pit bull mix, walk over to my mom, slowly climb up on the couch, lean into her and put his head under her chin. All she needed was a hug. And she needed a hug. And this tough dog crawled up and just gave her the love and compassion that she needed in that moment. And that just was like, oh my God, right? What did this dog just teach me? And then I started recounting other things. Oh my God, he taught me this. He taught me this. All these things around compassion and not judging others for where they are in their lives. So that's huge.
Yeah, no, that really is. Especially when maybe you didn't grow up in a family that was super, affectionate and all of that kind of stuff. That's a lot of men have expressed that as well.
Yep.
And then another thing too, I like what you said, without judgment, because, that I think that's why certain men maybe aren't vulnerable, is because of the judgment factor. And we went over this a little bit in the beginning, but that whole, once you get more cognizant of who you are, you're not as concerned about the judgment of others, you see. So once you are this more authentic version of Michael, authentic version of Melissa, then you can fully encapsulate that. And then the judgment is kind of like, well, who is this person? How are they doing in life? I don't know. Or maybe it's not even always just about the judgment, but when someone else sees you progressing and they're not there yet, and oh my God, you're 20 years younger than them, and what the hell? That's jealousy now. That's another thing too. So you don't even know where these, what sounds like judgment calls, are even coming from all the time too. So when you really, like I said, like get deep into it, it turns into all these other things. It's kind of like it shows its true face, and you're like, oh, that's not even anything to be concerned about. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then, if a male listener did want to work with you, how can they find you?
Easiest way is just through my website. They can send me an email. There's a contact form in there. And the site is www.dogsandmen.com, or they can email me directly, michael@dogsandmen.com.
Okay, perfect. And then I can link that in the show notes as well. Okay, so Michael, again, thank you. Like I said, long time coming for this episode, so I'm so glad we were able to connect. Yay! I know, I'm telling you, over a year now. And then, yeah. So basically, yes, thank you for that. And I just kind of wrap things up. This is just another great example of how spirituality and the use of different methods and teachings can really make great changes in your daily life. As always, if you are looking for a way to relieve stress and anxious thoughts, or looking to gain some clarity, you can always book a Reiki energy healing session or Akashic Records reading session with me at thenewagegoddess.com. Much love and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much.